Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, this time for something different since we're going to be talking about Ready or Not for the very first time on the channel, and we are going to be talking about the recent announcement they have made about their partnership with Team17. And since because it's kind of like something personal to me, I decided to be on camera more as myself rather than the character Hotrod for today, because I want to give you my opinion both as a player but also as someone who's been working in the games industry for over the past 10 years at major companies like Square Enix, Creative Assembly, and other studios and publishers across Europe. So for those who don't know, VOIDInteractive is the studio with the developers working on the design, the features, the art of the game. As a studio, they are mostly responsible for designing and developing most of the core features of the game, so essentially what really defines the identity of the game on the market with its gameplay. A typical studio usually has a couple of designers, definitely a lead designer, coders, artists, maybe a producer, and a little bit of QA. But since the mid-90s, early 2000s, this is not enough to make a game that can compete on the market anymore. The days of being able to make and sell a game with just a couple of coders and artists without taking a long time to develop, huge risks, and a lot of luck are long gone. And that's because we, the players, are expecting much more than that. Just to give you a simple example, we expect developers to talk to us, the players. That's already something that isn't and shouldn't be done by artists, coders, or designers. We also expect games to have a lot of players. That requires a lot of marketing and user acquisition on a regular basis. And developers can't do that. They shouldn't, because they are working on the game. Just to list a few, like data analysis done by BI departments and project managers, large-scale QA, live ops, server structure and maintenance, localization, marketing, user acquisition, community management, community development, customer support, release process management, relationship management with publishing platforms like Steam or Epic Games for featuring opportunities during sales or release, legal documents and user data privacy policies, and much more and much more. All of that are things that still need to be done if you want your game to have all the chances in the world to be successful from a commercial perspective, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. I'm just saying this in case you haven't realized yet and you still think games are made just for fun and by studios being charities. It's a business first and foremost. Has always been, will always be. And that's when publishers come in. Publishers help handle all of those little tasks that developers did not have the time to handle since they are supposed to be busy making the actual game. It enables studios to put their game on the market without having to make risky investments in hiring talents internally to handle the tasks for that game that maybe is not going to get much traction from the consumers at all, and maybe fail from a commercial perspective, which would most likely mean the end of the studio as well. But what about the Kickstarter campaign? I'll talk about that in a bit. So the Studio X publisher relationship has kind of received rather negative opinion over the past few years, mostly because they were given by people, mostly gamers, who, let's face it, know nothing about the actual games industry and how it works and how complicated it is and how political it is and how diplomatic you have to be to work in the games industry. But most of the time, the Studio X publisher relationship is a lot healthier than you can imagine. Most of the time, the relationship is based and defined on by a contract that is between the studio and the publisher, and there is little to no room for both parties to actually break that contract and behave in ways that they're not supposed to. So when a studio looks for a publisher, they take their time to find the right one, to find one that actually fits the needs of the studio and the needs of the project. And to be honest, most of the time, the publisher simply provides services based on the needs and the requirements of the studio, and rarely, very rarely gets involved in the actual development of the game. Mostly because most publishers don't have developers. I mean, people who work on codes and art and so on. In my opinion, everyone in the games industry is a developer. A QA is a developer. A producer is a developer. A community manager is a developer, because they all work towards the success of that game. But sometimes, right, publishers provide resources such as experienced coders, because maybe they have a few in-house to help develop something for the studio. But they are usually acting kind of like mercenaries, in a way that they go there, they have a goal set by the studio because there are specific requirements, needs, and a specific challenge. That coder that comes from the publisher goes and provides a couple of solutions and options for the studio to decide if they want to do them, if they want to invest in them, and so on. And if they yes, we want to do this one, then that coder executes, gives that back to the studio, and then goes back to the publisher and works on another project from another studio. But publishers also help studios understand how users are consuming the game. Most publishers help with data analysis, draft reports to highlight what is good, what is bad, and what needs to be improved with their game, especially after release, so that the developers can then design, propose, and work on solutions. And usually, they have to provide a proposal to address specific problems, and usually the publishers can say, we don't really believe that's a good solution. Can you maybe, spend more time looking for better options? Or they say, it sounds great, do it, awesome, we will support you. But if the studio strongly believes in the solution they provided, and the publisher say, we don't really believe in that one, but the studio still want to go ahead with it, that's fine. Usually they can. And they would have to have the right expectations about it. And that is, if it works, awesome. And then the studio gets more money because their games is getting better and their games sell better. But if it doesn't work, the studio is responsible for that. They are responsible for that failure. So when VOIDInteractive announced their partnership with Team17 a few days ago, I was pretty happy because it's a publisher with a pretty good track record of helping developers properly. They also understand development because they develop their own games. And we've seen that with Let Loose, for instance. I don't know the details of their agreements, but I can only assume Team17 will most definitely provide the usual services that you find from most publishers, which is more QA, localization, community management and development, and customer support as well, and then in different languages. Maybe marketing and user acquisition is really important, server structures and IT stuff and whatnot. So these are kind of the stuff that you will often expect publishers to provide. But I also assume that Team17 will maybe help with producing the game, since I think that's how they have really impacting Let Loose. Given how their roadmap was much better, or the frequency of their updates and the quality of their updates, all of that was much better as well. But what about the Kickstarter campaign? Well, I think that in general we have the wrong conceptions and expectations about how Kickstarter campaigns really help developers. It kind of sends the wrong message that because developers or studios do a Kickstarter campaign, they are financing a way to be fully independent and away from publishers. It cannot. It will never be. You'd have to gather way more than just a couple of $1 million to do that. Remember what I said earlier. Developing a good game is not enough anymore to put your project on the market and to have it being successful. You need to do so much more than just develop the code and the art style. But what that Kickstarter money essentially does is that it allows the developers to prototype a project that both you, the players, and the developers believe in. And sometimes there is enough money to actually take that prototype and that project to a pretty late stage in the development, like closed beta, which is already pretty good. That money could have come from any third-party investor too. Like, it could have been an angel investor, it could have been a bank, It could have been another developer from another studio who believes in the project and they are friends and they decide to give money, personal money, and then they kind of get into some sort of share program as well. It could have come from the profit, not the revenue, but the profit made with another game from that same studio of their portfolio as well. It could have come from a publisher. It could have come from a Kickstarter campaign. It could have come from all of those options together. And I think this is something that we should be getting used to, because we need to break those false conceptions we have about Kickstarter campaigns and Studio X publisher relationship and partnership that sometimes come much later in the project. They are good news. They are news that basically it tells you the studio is still alive and the project is going pretty well. So well that a publisher has actually accepted to publish the game. Now, some studios get really lucky with some games, and they can remain independent, like Battlestate with Escape from Tarkov, or the Robert Space Industries with Star Citizen, but those are anomalies, and it requires taking huge risks and a lot of luck to get there. Most games, most studios, they cannot survive without huge fundings or a publisher. So I don't think that VOID Interactive getting a publishing partnership with Team17 is a huge stab in the back of anyone who participated in the Kickstarter campaign or bought the game before the announcement. Because those players, those people who invested into the game before the announcement, have made it possible for VOID Interactive to survive and to keep working on the project until they could get a good version that they could present to a worthy publisher. So, and that's how I look at it, and that's how I think we should be looking at that current situation. More importantly, for a game to have all the chances to survive before, during, and especially after release, especially if a huge part of the game relies on multiplayer features such as PvP or co-op, you would hope that that game, that studio, finds a good publisher. So I'm pretty confident that R.O.D.E is going to benefit hugely from that new relationship with Team17 moving forward, and I cannot wait to see how the game evolves over time. So if you have any further questions about that topic specifically, or about the games industry in general, let me know in the comments below. I would be more than happy to give you answers and my personal opinions, both as someone who is a passionate gamer, but also as someone who is working and has been working in the games industry for quite a while now. Consider leaving a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel to support it, and don't forget to tick the bell to get a notification every time I publish a new video on the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.